successfully worked with the Met Police to abolish Form 696, a controversial risk assessment that targeted minority ethnic communities, and we established the Safer Sounds Partnership. This is a grassroots initiative uniting venue operators and promoters with police and council licensing teams to make it easier for organizers to put on events. We have enlisted over 1,000 nighttime businesses and organizations to the Women's Night Safety Charter, each of them pledging to take practical steps to make London more welcoming at night. And our signatories are as diverse as ranging from Transport for London to McDonald's to the Ministry of Sound to Pure Gym to the Association of Corner Shops and everything in between. We're also very proud that other cities that are represented here, including Bristol and Manchester City Council, have also adopted the Women's Night Safety Charter. And we're also incredibly proud to have set up the first Culture at Risk office here in the UK. This helps to protect hundreds of nighttime venues from potential closure. And I'm particularly proud to have worked with organizations like the Music Venues Trust, who are here today, and Westminster Council to help secure 100% business rate relief for the legendary 100 Club, and to help the operator there change their business model, unlocking more financial and in-kind support, securing it for future generations. And as we are here in E1, my team and I are incredibly proud to be working with UVAL here in this venue to ensure that the new development due to be built in this neighborhood, that E1 is preserved. And we recognize that high streets as well are part of the lifeblood of London's diverse communities. Our £500,000 nighttime enterprise zones scheme focuses on high streets and town centres after 6 p.m. This supports boroughs and businesses to experiment with new ways of diversifying their local nighttime offer. They encourage longer opening hours, wider participation in activities at night, and it also highlights the important role that night workers play in our local economies. So this was based on a successful pilot scheme we ran in Waltham Forest back in 2019. And so we now have 3 nighttime enterprise zones here in London. They are Vauxhall, Bromley, and Woolwich. So keep your eyes peeled for exciting things happening in those areas. So those are some of the things you may have seen in headlines or reported in the news, but there's a lot of sort of less headline grabbing, but arguably more deeply impactful initiatives, like the introduction of the night test to ensure that major new government policies and programs here in London are assessed for their impact on the people, places, and economy at night. And there are plenty of other inspiring projects across London, but it's important to say that all of this has been achieved through hard work, through dedication, through passion, and also through partnership. But it's not all rosy. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that the world order has been challenged. Trump, Brexit, COVID, war in Europe, cost of living crisis, I could go on. And the impact of these hurdles has been stark. A drop in confidence, a drop in investment, a real-term drop in wages. However, we must not allow a drop in our collective energy. Our nighttime businesses are hugely important to London's economic recovery and have had an incredibly tough couple of years as a direct result of the pandemic. You have been beacons of resilience, but the latest challenges of the cost of doing business crisis has really been a hammer blow. We need the government to step forward and provide support so our high streets at night can help drive forward our economic and our social recovery. And I really urge government to support these vital businesses with cuts in VAT for hospitality businesses, extending the 50% business rate relief for retail, culture, and leisure and hospitality sectors for a further year, and we need greater support for SMEs with energy costs. The prosperity of London's nighttime businesses has never been more crucial, and the government needs to follow London's lead and put life at night at the heart of all of our plans to help us build a fair, inclusive, and sustainable 24-hour city. Now, making sense of all that we've been through, individually, collectively, over the past few years, I feel hasn't even really begun. But what I am sure of is that the change and the challenge presents opportunity. Opportunity for fresh thinking and a new approach. Now, throughout the pandemic, I kept a quote from Benjamin Franklin on my desk. Do you know if anybody knows of Benjamin Franklin? No, he's an American writer, scientist, inventor, statesman, diplomat, printer, publisher, political philosopher, and I'm sure he would have been a night czar as well had the role existed in the 18th century. But in the face of unprecedented change, in Benjamin Franklin's case, it was the American colonies declaring independence. He said, "We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately." Now, I don't want to invoke a Boston-like Tea Party on the Thames today, but there is great wisdom in his words, because change requires bravery and a call to action, and most importantly, a collective bond. So what can we do in the face of all these crises, these challenges, these hurdles? Well, it reminds me of a lyric from my favorite band, the Smiths, not generally known for their optimistic views of the world. But in the song, "I Know It's Over," the lyrics really lull the listener to a better place, urging us to be brave, to be the best version of ourselves. It takes guts to be gentle and kind. So we must be brave and bold. We must be gentle and kind in a world that sometimes seems stacked against us. And we must continue to seek practical and, if necessary, radical solutions to difficult problems at night. Our collective efforts have the potential to transform our city, not only after dark, but 24 hours a day. And we have some incredibly dynamic and creative minds in the world with us today and tomorrow here at this conference. And I hope we all take inspiration and fresh ideas from our conversations. We are all better together at night. So let us prove that Benjamin Franklin's quote from over 250 years ago still holds true. Let us all hang together, so none of us will hang separately. Let us be bold, brave, gentle, and kind, and let us build a London at night that is fair, sustainable, and prosperous for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Amy Lame. Right, next up, we have a man who has done everything from Live Aid to Lord of the Dance, from Cirque du Soleil to WWF Wrestling. In 1996, he very rightfully was awarded a CBE, a true legend in the game, Mr. Harvey Goldsmith.
Morning. There's two mics here. Do I need this one or this one? This one? Nice to see you all. It's a lovely day. We live in very difficult times, and it's good that people have some interest in what's going on here. Some years ago, I sat on a committee looking at the future of the West End. And one of the key conclusions that we came to was that the nighttime economy was paramount to the success of a city. We realised that without a thriving nighttime city, the city itself would die. Capital cities like Canberra in Australia, for example, I can't see a thing here, that's why I'm moving around. Anyone do something with the lights? But still. They shut at 6 o'clock when the government employees go home. They don't hang around as there's nothing to do. So the city has become a ghost town at night. I mean, more recently, I think things have changed. But the interdependency of activities after work are critical. Yes, we also have to respect people who live in a city who want peace and quiet. But equally, we need successful, well-run businesses that can thrive after hours. Everyone is aware of the adage, if you decide to live next to a pub or a club or an arena or even a stadium, then please don't complain about being inconvenienced, which they often do. Many years ago, I did the first, I think, and only ever concert at Queen's Park Rangers, which is all fine except for one couple living in one corner who had moved there deliberately because they wanted to be near the club. And they objected violently to us doing a concert, which I think was with Yes. And we went all the way down to we were about to go to court, and then I discovered the reason why they were objecting so violently is because they wanted free tickets, and that was the end of it. So we sorted that one out. A recent example of the issues that we're all facing is the Fuse Club in Brussels, which after 29 years of operation has had its 24-hour licence revoked and sound capped to 95 dB due to the complaint of one neighbour. The NTIA, which I helped at the very beginning, came about to help those businesses that were struggling. We live in very strange times. I sometimes wonder if the lunatics have taken over the asylum. Busybodies and authorities combined have been allowed to dictate and make everyone's lives a misery. Although rules have been eased slightly since COVID, licensing laws are still draconian. Authorities must understand it is vital that nighttime activities are profitable without being too greedy. Otherwise, there'll be no reinvestment. Of course, the few that have flouted the rules have made it very difficult for those trying to comply. We cannot all be tarred with the same brush. Most owners in the room are responsible people. The few bad eggs must not be allowed to encourage the very tough circumstances we find ourselves in. Equally, we cannot allow the blue meanies to blot out the heart and soul of any city. I'm sorry about this, but I just literally can't see a thing. Maybe I'll push this back. The UK has generally created the best talent bank in the world, both behind the stage and on stage. This has happened because both technicians and artists are in the main have developed their craft while working in small pubs and through bigger clubs, concert halls, and then ultimately stadiums. As organisers, it doesn't matter where you are in the food chain, but the problems are still the same. It's ironic that every landowner, council and stately homeowner wants a festival, yet the same people always object to a nightclub in their vicinity. Even today, when I visit potential open-air venues and I inquire about licensing, I still get the owner telling me, "Don't you worry, laddie, I've got the council in my pocket." Of course, in reality, they don't. Yet there's rarely support for a new club or a small venue. Nearly all successful artists in whatever game they work start from small beginnings, begging to perform in a small club until they become successful. A few remember, unfortunately most don't. There's no shortage of talent, however, there is a huge shortage of technicians and backup staff. COVID somehow made everyone disappear. Something happened during that 2-year break from the world where the whole hospitality industry lost out. The combination of Brexit and COVID has caused a huge dent in available staff. Venues could not reopen because of staff shortage. As far as Brexit is concerned, the government completely left hospitality industry out of the negotiations. PR-wise, they spent more time on fishing and steel than us, even though we are much bigger in value than both fishing and steel combined. This has had a huge knock-on effect with resources. The energy situation is a killer. Now strikes are eating into the meagre, if any, growth that a producer can make. I'm sorry to say, but generally our industry is in a mess. That doesn't mean the end, but it does mean a rethink in how we're going to work going forward. When life is tough, sometimes the momentum starts of everything bad to start developing. In 2022, some bad decisions were made which knocked the confidence out of the paying public, who are deeply concerned about their safety. The recent event at Brixton Academy, the horrific mess at the Travis Scott Astro World Festival in Houston are dreadful accidents that should not have happened. Risk-taking and shortcuts by management, fueled by the lack of trained staff, have highlighted these post-COVID issues. 2022 is probably the busiest year for entertainment in its history. But was it the most successful? I doubt. Events that went on sale in 2018, which were 2019, sorry, which were postponed in 2020 and again in 2021, were finally fulfilled in 2022. However, costs went up in some cases by over 30%. And in addition, a whole slew of new events went on sale. The problems caused by that were mainly staffing issues. There is not enough trained security. There aren't enough roadies. Load in and load out staff are few and far between. We're desperately short of catering staff and waiters. There are not enough truck drivers, bus drivers, and catering truck drivers. And some of the biggest festivals in 2022 had real difficulties in getting loadouts done on time because the staff just did not turn up. Restaurants have had to close on certain days and can no longer offer an early morning opening. Increasingly, and interestingly, a good friend who owns 7 very successful restaurants told me recently that recruiting today meant that staff only want to work 4 days a week. I don't understand how that works. What do they do? What do they live on? The jobs are there, but the incentive to work is not anymore. The meta world and a lack of general interest, coupled with restrictions on those abroad who want to work with us, have compounded this mess. We have a lack of enticing new staff into the business and training them well. We have to find ways of dealing with that. instilling into them a real new work ethic and pay them accordingly with incentives. Sites like Entourage Pro, which offer a notice board with job availabilities, could be used and encouraged. Artists are also forcing promoters to demand much higher ticket prices and entry fees. The West End theatres are having a difficult time because the tourist industry has not fully recovered. Yet even they have put ticket prices into the £200 plus margin, which is nuts. Economically, the compound effect of higher costs and inflation mean that ticket prices have to go up. However, the public are not buying it. Other than top pop and dinosaur acts, which will always sell, everyone else is suffering. I might add that my disgust of artists who are very popular taking total advantage of gouging their fans with a multitude of ticket scams, high box office fees, platinum tickets, front of the line, premiums, etc., does not help. There has to be a balance between the upcoming artists and the top layer. I also think we're going through a down period in artist creativity. The dinosaur artists are disappearing fast. There's no one replacing them. There is no creative spark currently. Artists today, through their representatives, want everything, but they want it right now, and they're not prepared to wait. We do not have a demand culture anymore, with a few exceptions. I still believe that if you think you can sell a 12,000 seater, play a 10,000 one, not add an extra show at the promoter's risk, which then sells less than 50% of the capacity. It's become very noticeable that people waiting until the last minute to buy tickets, partly because of the cost of living has risen, partly because they think if they wait long enough, they believe they'll be offered a ticket at a vastly reduced price or even free. And this is a particularly bad habit in America. Now, some facts. Grassroots venues contribute 500 million to the economy. Currently, the average profit margin, believe it or not, is 0.2%. Prior to the pandemic, there were over 113,000 licensed trade premises. Today, we have dipped to under 100,000. 4,800 premises closed in the last 12 months, most in the last quarter. The spate of strikes has cost over £2 billion in revenue. Yet, the UK nighttime economy is worth £36.4 billion a year, with 1.94 million people employed. A normal year attracts 300 million tourists. Costs are up 40% across the board. Customer footfall is down 15 to 20%. We are losing a nightclub every 3 days. We are over-regulated. As a consequence, we make mistakes. This needs to be corrected. Our associations are best placed to represent us, and we need to advocate how important the nighttime economy is to a town or city. So what is the future? We work in a commercial, creative world, but I do not believe in government subsidies. We have to find our own way of making it work. We are coming out of a seismic shift in our industry that is terrible, but also opportunistic. We must collectively fight all the negative sides of education and pressure. The government must be constantly reminded how important the nighttime industry is. And I have to say the NTIA and the Music Venue Trust and UK Live are doing a good job on getting the message across. But UK music, and particularly the BPI and the MPA, could do better. For reasons I simply do not understand, the record industry and the music publishers did absolutely nothing during COVID. We don't at this time need the PRS, PPL breathing down our necks, demanding more and more. Licensing needs to be joined up and simplified. Today it costs a fortune to create the health and safety remit, only because no one wants to take responsibility. Yes, we have to be minded of correct and workable safety, just to not the bullshit that's offered to us and often imposed upon us. We have to learn to deal with terrorism and individual shooters at gigs. We have to be brave enough to say no if we think an artist draws are an unsafe crowd. We have to be strong enough to take control if there is a problem, to calm our audience and stop artists winding up an audience dangerously. We need new talent to have a voice. Talent that is looking for medium to long-term success, not a 5-minute wonder. We have to be mindful of not inflating ticket prices to satisfy the greed of the artists. We have to learn to say no. And at the same time, if we believe we've found some great new talent, say yes and keep supporting that talent until they're successful. We have to give great value in a safe and comfortable environment. We need to actively support our various associations to lobby on our behalf. We simply have to get smart and do better. We can and we will. Thank you.
Right, huge thanks to Harvey. I think with these lights up here, he's managed to pick up his tan a little bit. Seems to be pretty ridiculous. It's all good. It's all good. Right, we're going to do a little Q&A with Harvey because we want to make the most of his time, if possible, while he sorts out his H2O. We're going to ask him a couple of questions and then we're going to put it out to the audience as well because I'm sure you've got your own. The first one that I wanted to probably go down the road of is, as I mentioned in my intro, you've done a very wide range of events, everything from Cirque du Soleil to WWF Wrestling to Live Aid to the Royal Albert Hall and Opera. Yeah, he'll be performing a techno set later on at the after party. But in your extensive experience, what would you say the challenges that you've experienced over such a lengthy career, what of those challenges can you identify in the current market?
I think the biggest issue we've got today, generally, is there's too much readily available and it's all over the place. So there are no longer genres of activity that everybody follows. And if you own a club or you're promoting a new act or any act, marketing is really tough today. Everybody says, oh, it's all social media, which for the top pop acts, of course it is. Those who've got millions of followers. But beneath that, it's really difficult to find the right vehicle or a spread of vehicle because you have to spend 3 or 4 times as much to get the same results. And that's a big, big issue. And so as much on the club and pub level, they're taking risks with new acts every time, hoping people that come and support them. If at the top end, those artists are charging so much money to buy a ticket, there's nothing left to take a risk to see someone else, that's becoming a problem. And that's besides the physical costs of of energy and this, that, and the other, which a club or a small venue has to face. They also have to face the fact that people just don't have any spare money in their pockets anymore.
Yeah, so obviously that's kind of like a bit of it's a perfect storm really, because obviously the events and the venues have to put their prices up in order to counteract the costing of it, and therefore ticket prices are going through the roof, but then the actual general public haven't really got the opportunity to attend and afford those tickets for exactly the same reasons. Exactly. Obviously, yeah, COVID's boring, economy is the new buzzword, and in this day and age, you've identified obviously things like energy issues and economy and stuff. Where do you feel, and this is obviously the naughty one, where do you feel the current government are responding, or where do you feel they could concentrate on to assist in general society, but then specifically for us in the hospitality industry?
As I said earlier, in the main, I don't believe in government support. I think we're in a commercial world, we have to take care of ourselves. However, in the current circumstances, the thing that did help us was the VAT relief. When VAT went down to, obviously, initially 5% and then even 12%, that was a big help. And clearly, the energy issue, if you think about it, every club has to have a good sound system, has to have lights, etc., etc., etc. That costs a fortune. And although, as I heard this morning, Michael Lewis pleading with the Chancellor to carry on with the alleviation of energy rates with a cap, he believes that energy prices are going to start to go down, and he said it'll be going down as early as July. So it may be a big hiccup and it'll sort itself out, but we have to be very wary of it, and we've got to, in the future, provide for that when we're doing our budgets.
Yeah, that's obviously the opportunities where the government can step in and assist us. Obviously, in your experience, you've must have seen a myriad of challenges throughout it. So, in this current society, where do you, as someone with your experience, see the opportunities for us in the hospitality sector to progress?
Like everything in life, the adage doesn't change. You have to give the best service possible. You have to do every single night in your club or your venue as if it's the premiere of some major film or major artist or whatever. You've got to go the extra mile to encourage people to want to come back, to enjoy themselves, to make sure they're in a safe environment security-wise. That's the best possible thing that we can do, because if we don't treat people properly, if we allow situations like the Brixton thing the other week to happen yet again, we're going to lose our audience. They're frail and fragile enough as it is, because they're looking into their pockets for the first time ever. I mean, none of you will remember, I go back as far as the miners' strike. But during the miners' strike, the problem was power, and we did as many shows as we possibly could, which was depending on how many generators we could get our hands on, but every show was full. Today, we have everything available to us, and not every show is full, or even close to it. People are very mindful what's in their pocket today. So to get them to come out and enjoy themselves and spread the word to other people, you've got to go over and above the norm.
We like that. We like that a lot. I think we can give him a bit of a round of applause on that one, without a doubt. Obviously, we're surrounded by a lot of our peers in this room. What do you, on a more positive note, what do you like about modern day events and production?
Not a lot. I think, again, when you look at the number of festivals and open air events that take place, and activities outside music, again, those that give great value, those that go the extra mile, those that take a duty of care with their public are the winners. And the ones that don't are the absolute abject losers. But the knock-on effect of the losers, unfortunately, is outweighing the winners currently. So there are more festivals and open air shows than I've ever seen in my life, ever. And there seem to be more and more coming in 23 and even in 24, which is fine. But you have to give value. You can't expect somebody sitting on the top of a stadium of 80,000 seats to pay 150 quid or £200 for their ticket when they need a telescope to see the artist. If you're going to have sound, it's got to be brilliant sound. If you've got a stage show, then put on a great stage show. But you've got to give value. You've got to take care of people. And it starts right at the beginning, because when people enter a venue, the first people they say that is the security people and the ticket checkers. If they're not good people, well-trained, who can spot a problem or be nice to people, you're already in a bad mood before you get to a show. Often artists say to me when they go on stage after it takes them 3 or 4 numbers to get the audience going, and they don't understand why. I always say the same to them. It's not your fault, it's because the nanny didn't turn up, they missed their bus, the train was late, they got stuck in traffic, they couldn't find anywhere to park. When they got to the venue, they were treated like shit by the security people who made them line up in the freezing cold, etc., etc. By the time they got in the venue to see the act, it takes them 3 or 4 numbers before they can just calm down and get into it. That's the problem, and that's something we need to be mindful of.
Right, Harvey, really appreciate your time on the Q&A. It's going to be a bit hard for me to identify if you've got your hand up, but has anyone got any questions? Yeah, first, please. Yeah, sure.
Ian Smith, I'm co-director of the Carry On Touring campaign with Tim Brennan, also multi-agency owner, campaigner. Harvey, you said earlier you don't believe in government support. I tend to agree with that, but I don't agree with government blocking either of our industries. One thing you also said was that there's a great lack of support workers, great talent support workers in the industry. Since Brexit, of course, we've now got much greater barriers to bringing people in to fulfil those roles, let alone the people who don't necessarily want to do them in the UK. So is there somewhere that the nighttime economies can lobby the government in order to try and relax some of the rules on mobility so that we've got the people and the talent to be able to support?
I have to say, I've never relied on foreign people coming into England for my shows. I've always relied totally on local people, local crews, which I think we should encourage, etc. Something's gone wrong somewhere, because there was a plethora of security companies with all offering great services. There were tons of road crew people, or people queuing up to do it. Most of the production directors, production managers and designers that worked for me all came up because they were originally humpers, loading and loading out. There doesn't seem to be that incentive anymore. And interesting about the comment I said that people going for jobs only want to work 4 days a week. I can't for the life of me understand, A, what they live on, but what they do the other 3 days of the week. It doesn't make any sense to me. So we have to make it more exciting, more enticing, and I'm afraid we're going to have to pay them more money. But we cannot rely on foreign workers to do the jobs of people where there are plenty of people available locally to do the same job.
Any other questions out there? Yes, please.
Something you said about the dinosaurs are running out. How the dinosaurs, we're running out of dinosaurs before. Traditionally, the independent venues, places like myself, we generated and implied that new sound. We go back to the 70s, the birth of heavy rock. In my neck of the woods in Wolverhampton, to your Rusty Egan, Stephen Strange and Blitz. We had Sasha, the birth of Acid House. I won't mention the promoters' names for obvious reasons. Yes, we are now lacking the ability for live music, DJ, that new sound to come through. Those teenagers with the attitude and belief to say, no, stuff you, this is our sound. And without our venues, without our small premises and allowed to flourish, and it's the restrictions of council and government that prevent it, we have the cost. And music is dying. We've generated all new music across the world. Every decade, for 15 years, we've not generated a new sound. Youth culture's lost an aspect to flourish. We need our small venues.
I agree with you.
How do we get them?
I agree with you 1,000%. And it is a push on all fronts. It's a push with local authorities to be mindful of licensing, because as I said right at the beginning, the last thing we need is at 6 o'clock everything shuts except the odd pub, and that's it. That just doesn't work. We have to make music more exciting. We have to stop relying on wannabes who think they could be there in 5 minutes, who then have success for 5 minutes and disappear. We've got to develop acts and stick with them. And if we see great talent, we've got to keep helping to push it through, because that in turn encourages audiences who are coming for the first time to see a great new act and are just wowed by it. They'll come back and they'll come back and they'll go, what else have you got? So we're going through this low period for a lot of different reasons. And the low period's about lack of creativity, it's about costing, it's about limited licensing, but without the grassroots venues, without exactly what you've just said, the whole thing's going to die. People can't just come in at this level, they've got to start working down here. And they have to pay their dues, and whether you like it or not, when they do pay their dues, when they do go back and play clubs time and time again till they build up a big enough audience of fans who will then, spread the word, you're going to come and go very quickly. It's a crying shame that so many clubs are being forced to close. There's something desperately wrong. And at the same time, where government do come in, and we do have to lobby them, for once and for all, we have to go to the Department of Culture and whatever the fuck they do, think they're doing, and explain to them who we are, what we do, and how important we are. The whole point, this group that I sat on, 12 of us, were asked by government to have a look at the 25-year future of the West End. It was chaired by the Chief Executive of Manchester Council. It had people from all walks of life who joined in. We learned things that I had no idea about. I didn't know that in the West End today, every single day of the week, there are power cuts. I didn't realise there wasn't enough power in the West End. The police had, although they're slowly changing their attitude, for a period of time, they wanted life to stop at 6 or 7 o'clock so they didn't have to go out at night. That's no good either. So we have to educate, train, push and cajole authorities to allow us to build and run responsible venues that encourage in itself new talent to come through, which comes through from our club. Because if you turn around and say, I was the club that broke Bruce Springsteen, the next act's going to come in and go, well, I want to be there as well. You'll find it. If, going forward, that kind of music is still in demand, I'm not 100% convinced it is, because currently, as you know, the whole music scene is of a different kind of genre. But if we don't try it, it'll never work. And I promise you, those clubs that run a really good, successful business are the ones, say, clubs that give the best value and the best quality to their audience.
Well said. Right, is there any other questions? Okay, one more.
Press it. Right. Thank you. Thanks. My questions are twofold, because you made some good points, among many. Firstly, how do we get operators to invest in quality staff, quality SIA, pay that money, so they don't put their licences and business at risk? And allied to that, how do you speed up the queues at events or for large clubs and what have you, without compromising on service?
Two very good, difficult questions. In terms of getting new people, somehow we've got to go out and do an exercise that it's good. It's good to work. It's good to work in a club. It's good to learn the craft. There's a great future out there for you. We have to think about how to do that. Sorry, something's buzzing. We have to think about how to deal with that. We have to think about how to train. We have to offer a training program for young people coming into the business. We've got to entice them in. And unfortunately, we've got to offer them incentives financially for them to, but it's there. And out of humble beginnings of being, a humper or a loader at a venue, you could end up being, as I say, a production director for a big festival. For the second part of your question, it's just as difficult. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think we have to try and encourage as much as possible a range of talent who want to break through and have to do it. What was the last bit of your question? Sorry.
The last bit was the big queues to events or platforms.
Oh, the queues. I think it's just being efficient. I think the deal with crews is you've got to train the ticket takers and security really well. You've got to have somebody going on the line asking them to have their, if you're going into a club or whatever, their identification ready. You've got to have, if it's a ticket, you've got to have your ticket ready. And then you've got to have enough openings to push people through as quickly as possible. And you've got to be efficient about it. You can do it, you've just got to make it, you've got to encourage your public to be ready when they get there. And you've also got to tell them in future, don't bring glass bottles, don't bring this, don't bring that. Eventually they'll get the message. But I think it's just training and definition of how to do it is the best way, and of giving them advance warning as they're in the queue to push them through.
Right, sorry, we had one more question there.
Yeah, just a quick one. You mentioned about the big name artists charging huge amounts for tickets. So tying in with that, I'd like to ask what you think of the dynamic ticketing system that Ticketmaster's been bringing in, because I've been reading a lot of awful scenarios from fans in America when they've been trying to get tickets, and I'm really frightened of that happening to me when I'm trying to buy that big ticket artist as well. So just wondering what you think about that.
It's a huge debate at the moment. I wrote a piece for an American newsletter the other day, and basically what I said on what I believe in, the whole issue of ticket pricing, how they're distributed, and what happens with whether you have dynamic pricing or front of the line or golden circle, this, that, and the other, actually is the remit of the artist. And at the end of the day, when artists close their eyes and say, we don't care what happens, just sell the show out, we want to be paid, and if there's any surplus profits, we want our piece of it, there's nothing you can do. Those artists that do care about their fans, do care about their public, and say, the price of my ticket's 55 quid, that's the price I want people to pay, plus obviously a box office service charge, which in my opinion should never be more than 10%. If that's what they dictate, that's what happens. Everybody blames Ticketmaster, but it's not Ticketmaster's fault. They're only the service provider that will do whatever you want because they don't want to lose your business. So if you, Bruce Springsteen, turn around and say, I'm happy to have the middle 15 rows sold at $600-700 to $5,000 a ticket, and the front rows are only $250, that's fine with me, get on with it. They get on with it. But if you, Ed Sheeran, says, I don't care who you are, where you come from, the price of my ticket's 65 quid and that's what you'll pay, and if you buy it off a tout site or you pay more for it, you ain't going to come in, that happens. So those are your two contrasts. And that's the problem today. Everybody blames the ticket company. The ticket company's the provider. It's the machine that delivers the distribution and gets you your ticket. They don't create this. If they are doing it off somebody's back, they'll get found out very quickly. But actually, it's the artist that lets it happen. And then there are, obviously, in the main, most promoters want it to work. But the promoters under the demise of the artist as well. If the promoter says, I want £1 million and I've got 5,000 tickets to sell, it doesn't take too much to do the budget to figure out you've got to charge 500 quid a ticket, etc. So at the end of the day, the agents, the managers and the artists are 1 billion% responsible for the ticket mess we're dealing with.
Rousing words. Sadly, we've got to wrap it up. Yep. Sadly, we've got to wrap it up. Before he goes and puts his after sun on, I'm sure you might be able to catch Harvey if you've got any other questions. But for now, from talking about current economy, his past, and obviously what can come for us with grassroots going forward. A big thanks to Harvey. Right, we're going to be taking a 15-minute break before we move into our Skiddle panel. Go grab a coffee and a wee, or whatever you need to do, and we'll see you shortly.